see?
Yes, we can see. Yes, we can see. Go ahead, Sam, please.
All right, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I want to apologize once again on behalf of Ayodeji, my group CEO. Like Mr. Bashir had said, they were in contact up until yesterday, and this is very unusual. Still making efforts to reach him, and I'm sure that whatever reason it is that he's unable to join us at this point will be something totally out of his control. So I'll just try to run through these slides very quickly. From the discussion so far, I have a clear sense of what the intent is for this conversation, particularly as regards with commodities. So what I'll do is I'll be running us through the ecosystem, some of the numbers, and then I would also get to the point where we speak about, what it is that a lot of the people here would be looking towards, right? I saw that from the start, the initial or the focus was tending towards getting foreign exchange earnings through commodities. So if we get to the slides, next slide, please. Next. Okay, so just trying to give a global picture of what has gone on in the commodities market over the years, and particularly interesting since the year 2020 when COVID started, right? So with commodities, typically what we would see is that there is an upward trend in prices, right? From when these commodities are harvested and then, up to the point in time where they are utilized until you have a farming season. And that is mostly peculiar to the Nigerian environment. In the global ecosystem or the global environment, where we typically have a lot of countries that do, irrigation farming, that farm using hydroponics and all of the other methods of farming that allow them to have commodities in their ecosystem all year round, you would typically not find those sort of, high volatilities, except we have events. And like I mentioned, COVID was one of those events, right? So COVID brought a lot of disruptions in supply chains. It was difficult to move either the commodities themselves or for trucks to move. Lockdowns across different countries, right? A lot of those lockdowns being protectionist, agendas by these countries just to make sure that they were able to curb the spread of the virus. That disruption led to significant increase in prices, pressure on, on the prices because there was that increasing demand across different countries, right? A lot of the countries were also shoring up their supplies, all of their strategic grain reserves, because nobody knew at that point in time how long the pandemic was going to last or what was going to happen, right? And then after COVID and getting things begin to normalize, we then saw the Russia-Ukraine war happen, and that was February 2021, right? That happened, and there was another wave of increase in prices because when you look at the demograph, Russia, Ukraine responsible for a significant portion of, corn, wheat that is supplied globally across countries, right? You would think that that would not impact much, right? And that's true. But I think a lot of the significant impact of the Russia-Ukraine war came from the disruptions in the movement of energy. So a lot of energy globally is produced within those regions, and part of the things that come out from the production of that energy is used in the production of fertilizer, which is then required globally to produce agricultural commodities. So on the back of that, what happened was there was an increase in the price of inputs. Countries globally, even though they were willing and able to produce, were unable to get all of those input requirements, in terms of fertilizers and CPPs that would come off of the whole process of of refining energy in those regions, right? So coming to Nigeria specifically, what we saw was that there was that impact, and lucky for us, there was a delay in the impact. We didn't feel it on the back of the corn that would be imported, because again, Nigeria doesn't import significant volumes of corn from that region. But we did see the impact in terms of wheat and its effect. So bread prices, our price of bread, went up significantly, and this happened across different, regions, worldwide, right? All of the data that we then show here shows how all of the different indices that would track food prices were on the rise during that period. Let's get to the next slide, please. Okay, so still speaking to the Nigerian, environment, and this is domestically, we try to look at the inflation rate. We're aware that the CPI is largely food, right? And so with all of this increase in inputs, fertilizers, we then did see that the inflation rate kept going up, and that basket kept going up. Prices of commodities kept going up in the country. And the major reason why that impacts us, right, locally, is in Nigeria, particularly for agricultural commodities, we operate a monoseasonality for virtually all of the commodities that are produced in the country. So be it maize, soybeans, sorghum, what you find is that once we have the first rains drop, farmers will typically go to farm. They do the first level land preparation, ready for the season. As we get to May, June, when the rains begin to drop a lot more heavily than we would have, all of those farmers will then begin to produce, right? So every farmer going to the farm at the same time, producing these crops, it takes 3 to 4 month cycle for all of this to happen. And then we get to sometime around September when farmers will typically harvest, right? And when they harvest, what happens is that there is a lot of supply out there in the market, and prices will typically be at the lowest point. Now, part of the research we were doing, we tried to see what the absorptive capacity is for commodities in Nigeria in terms of the storage facilities that we have. And we found that despite all of the silos that have been built, and even the private sector investment in infrastructure for storage and warehousing in the country, that Nigeria today still has a 5% absorptive capacity. 5% in the sense that we can only store about 5% of the total volume of commodities that we produce annually. When you check, or you do a comparative analysis, you find that countries like China are able to store about 105 or 110%, I think 110% more than what it is. So they're able to store everything they produce every year, and they still have space for a little more. Countries like South Africa are somewhere around 80%, right? And there's a whole list of countries. Unfortunately, I don't have that in this slide, but very interesting to see, right? So on one hand, with that, these countries are able to ensure that they have food security for their citizens. Importantly, is that they are able to manage the prices of commodities in the country, and also tend to manage inflation, because you don't see all of that level of volatility in food prices across these different countries. When we get to the next slide, I think that shows us some of the numbers in terms of, exactly, in terms of, the macros. So there is this very wonderful case being made for agriculture, and particularly in Nigeria and Africa, right? So we look at contribution to GDP. Over the past, 5 years, agriculture has consistently contributed over 25% to GDP, right? Unfortunately, when you look at the budgetary allocation to agriculture, it is significantly low. So farmers are going to farm and they're farming because they have to survive. A lot of these farmers tend to be smallholder farmers, and they are unable to scale beyond what it is, that one hectare of farmland that they would typically farm, because we don't have, all of the supporting infrastructure and all of the macro policies that would support, production in the country. Part of what we do at AFEX, despite being a commodity exchange, is that we interact with farmers, right? And you find that a lot of these farmers are not expanding their, farm holding or farm size, not because they don't want to or they don't enjoy the benefits, but because there are challenges around it, right? So I remember very clearly interactions with a couple of farmers, and then you hear the discussions go like, oh, why aren't you increasing this size if you're able to get this much out of it? And the farmer tells you, point blank, that he has a number of challenges. One is that he's unable to access financing, right? Because he is either unbanked or underbanked. You don't have the major banks, particularly the commercial banks, operating around the areas and the regions where these farmers operate, right? But outside of that is that if he produces more than that 1 hectareage of farm land, he would be stuck with those produce because, again, I talked about the absorptive capacity in the country, right? And so he doesn't have where to store those commodities, for the period that would give him the sort of value that he really should get. And when you look at the number of, or the percentage of, smallholder farmers in the country, I mean, the commercial farmers in the country are almost, non-existent, or it's negligible, to say that the smallholder farmers in Nigeria are responsible for over 80% of the total production in the country, right? These farmers don't have access to mechanization. So we look at the numbers here and we say that we have about 0.27 horsepower per hectare in Nigeria, which is way below the 1.27 horsepower per hectare that is recommended. And, that is supposed to be like the minimum that you have. But in other countries, when you do that comparative analysis, I mean, even down to Kenya, what they call a smallholder farmer actually is operating on about 10 to 50 hectares of land, and most of the time has a tractor that he can use to farm his land, right? The grain basket in the country is somewhere around 30 million metric tons, of which, I mean, and when you look at, agric in terms of composition, a significant chunk is, crop production, and then we have livestock, right, making the rest of it. Contribution to GDP about 36.4%. All of these numbers reported by the NBS, right? And there is still a funding gap. So for me, and I think for a lot of my colleagues, right, we share the same sentiment, that if you have all of these numbers that seem to make the case for agriculture, why is it that, funding to that sector still remains low? Why is it that, the government participation in that sector in terms of providing the enabling environment is still low, right? But if you shift from all of that, I think the way I like to look at all of this data and, move on from it is that there is significant opportunity there, right? And across every facet of the value chain. So if we talk about storage and infrastructure, and I'm standing here today to tell you that absorptive capacity is at about 5%, it means that there's significant room. So you have, the entire 95% left that becomes a business case for you to put your money or invest in commodities, right? So I tend to look away from the challenges and then begin to see what the opportunities are. In terms of funding, financing, right? Question is, why can't a smallholder farmer be financially included? Why can't the smallholder farmer be banked, right? And one of the ways that we've done that serves as a model that can be scalable is that we've set up warehouses, storage infrastructure, and this is at AFEX level now across different states in the country, mostly the grain or commodity producing regions, right? And this is a model that we've run over 8 years now, and it seems, it's working, right? So these warehouses serve as meeting points for these smallholder farmers, to the extent that with a system, you can register this farmer, bring them into the financial ecosystem. You can partner with the banks, open accounts for them. With NIBS, you're able to have offline BVNs created for these farmers, right? If you interact with these farmers, see that virtually all of them do have their voter cards, right? So they are somehow in the system. And with this, you can then go that extra step to bring them on board. So that provides another opportunity for someone playing in that space to then say, how do we bring all of these farmers onto the ecosystem, right? And you look at the resilience of agriculture and the fact that several times agriculture is that one sector that has been able to keep us as a country out of recession or pull us out of recession at the point in time that we find ourselves there, right? So there is a lot of opportunity and a lot of business case for investing in agriculture. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think I have spoken to most of this from the previous. Yeah, so running through just says remains,
Attention, please.
single. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so I've spoken about it being the backbone for recovery, and how resilient that sector is, how it has been able to pull us out of recession, or keep us out of recession over the years. Right. So next slide, please. Okay, and this is also interesting because we try to look at the supply demand dynamics. And this is part of the reason why we've seen prices, move up significantly over time. And this is, based on the fact that particularly in Nigeria, demand has constantly outweighed supply. When I interact with, the market, with clients, with investors, and just my peers generally, they try to find out why is it that prices of commodities tend to go upwards, right? Or in making investment decisions, how are they sure that prices would not go the other way, or that prices would not dip? And I argue that the numbers speak for themselves. So except you have an event, what would happen is, so except you have an event, what would happen is, because there is that gap in terms of demand and supply, the prices would always go up. And if you look at the crops individually, today with a commodity like maize, consumption is somewhere around 14 million metric tons. However, production, right, in terms of what it is that we farm, the yields that we get, is somewhere around 12 million metric tons. 10 to 12 million metric tons. The numbers keep changing, right? So there is that 2 million metric ton gap, or 2 million metric ton deficit, between production and consumption, right? And also when you check with population numbers, our population is growing at over 2%, per annum, and we're not producing as much. So what happens, or what is happening, is that 2 million metric ton that we even talk about keeps widening up, despite all of the, so-called interventions that we find in that sector and in the space, right? So that provides an opportunity. As an investor, I will invest in agriculture and commodities because I tend to see, a clear reason. The fundamentals show me that prices would go up just based on that alone. And all I have to do is to make sure that my timing is critical to take advantage of that opportunity. For a commodity like soybean, there is about a 50% deficit in terms of, production and consumption, right? So the numbers show that we are producing about 750,000 metric tons, but consuming about 1.5 million metric tons, right? I think the only commodity that has sort of, tried to average a little over the years, or we have a little reduction in the volatility, would be paddy rice. This is driven by all of the interventions that we have seen by the federal government, and the fact that there is now irrigation or dry season farming, as we call it in Nigeria, across about 4 states. So we'll have Kebbi, Kano, Jigawa, and Sokoto, right, that do some level of irrigation farming. So we then have 2 seasons for paddy rice, and we'll begin to see a reduction in the volatility of prices. What would typically drive the prices of paddy rice now would be the growing population, the fact that it's a heavily consumed staple, and then events such as, the festivities that we'll have and will require a lot of paddy rice, right? So all of this, again, make that case for anybody that is looking at commodities as an investment asset, both either from a financial investment standpoint or even on a fiscal level, right, that they can go ahead and make these investments, right? Next slide, please. Okay, so again, looking at the entire value chain, we try to highlight all of the different challenges that we'll find, right? But in doing so, what we've also done is to highlight the opportunities that come alongside these challenges. So from input supply, and the fact that for you to produce, you need to put something. So inputs cut across seeds, fertilizer, chemicals, all of that, right? So there's that challenge in terms of the cost of inputs, the availability of these inputs, understanding how to utilize these inputs, and the fact that even for irrigation, we don't have so much of it here, right? And I believe we'll share the slide so you then get to look at it. But running through overall all of the different aspects of the value chain does come with its challenges, right? And we've tried to then identify the opportunities that investors could then enjoy or benefit. Apologies, please. I'm trying to catch your flight, so I'm just trying to run through very quickly also, so we don't waste the day. So let's get to the next slide, please. Okay, so again, looking at the different opportunities or ways that we here can take advantage of, investing or exploring the ecosystem, right? That for those of us that farm, there is room to keep increasing our production volumes, and you could do so either via partnerships with entities such as ourselves, or you could continue, doing at the level that you operate. What we found is that a lot of people then shift from producing on their own, either with the tractors, but they then tend towards the whole outgrower scheme, right? That allows them to engage a number of smallholder farmers, either put them as a cooperative, use that to unlock financing, right, from the commercial bank. But it's a lot easier for the commercial banks to deal with farmers at cooperative level than to deal with them on an individual basis, right? So they're able to operate at that level. With harvesting logistics, you can then go ahead to invest in all of the equipment that will be required. So you can today count the number of harvesters that we have in the country, right? But then again, there is that room, there is that opportunity to take advantage to either procure more of this equipment, deploy them for use. And I think what I can guarantee is that outside of the informal sector, that there is now with the exchanges in place, a formal environment or ecosystem for you to then interact and be able to deal with your commodities, right? I'm sure a number of us, either at farm production level, would then have challenges around around markets and high value markets to sell these commodities, right? But today you can then interact with the exchange, right, and have all of these commodities securitized to the extent that they can be traded. A lot of challenges around quality of these commodities, right? And I'm sure for those of us that then export, we would have challenges in making sure, ensuring that the commodities that we have out of the farms, or if we're producing, or if you're a trader, that you aggregate from the different smallholder farmers and traders, that they meet the quality requirements of the countries that would be exporting them to, right? So today, AFEX as an exchange, in conjunction with the SEC and the SON, has standards for most of these commodities that you could then deploy. The way we work and part of our model is that although a commodity exchange that would allow investors, particularly those on the financial side, right, to invest in securitized version of these commodities or contracts, right, that you could also leverage the infrastructure that we've built, to have your commodities. And I think one of the things I find very interesting with commodities and, in relation to, I would like to say the party, based on my understanding of this group and its objectives, is that it meets all of the requirements, for halal, right? So today on the exchange, virtually every product that we have, even on the financial side, has an ethical component to it. We have commodity-backed CPs that are, Sharia compliant, with all of the necessary certifications being issued, because these commodities are tangible, they exist, they can be bought, they can be sold, right? And to the extent that they are not used they are not used in processes that fall out of line with the Sharia laws, that they are halal or they can be certified as Sharia compliant, right? So I think I will just pause at this point. If there are questions, comments, I will take. So it's more like a discussion than just me speaking at everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Fantastic. Thank you so much. We can't thank you enough for this intervention, and for the inconveniences this might have brought to you. Thank you so much once again. It's very short, but it's very, very impactful. I wish we could do much more in terms of exploring the entire presentation and having enough time to have conversation, but it's better late than never, I want to believe, and I think the audience would also appreciate that. Without much wasting time again, I think we can have some Q&A. I don't know how many more minutes do you have before you catch your flight that you can accommodate for the Q&A.
I guess we can just start quickly. I'm actually getting on board now, but let's see how many we take.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, Tabidin Olari Bibe, your question, please.
Okay, thank you very much for the beautiful presentation. It's highly laudable. My question is based on most of the challenges that products here in Nigeria that are exported outside are facing. how is AFEX trying to work on standardization? Then secondly, another challenge with most of the products is we're told they are grown with inorganic fertilizers, and this is something which they are trying to phase out in the developed climate. How are AFEX trying to make sure that their group of farmers are able to follow the normal standards that match up with the international what's called acceptability, and how they were able to work around the general supply chain? Thank you.
Thank you. One more question. Wakil Fakoya, please. Your question.
All right. So,
Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, Sam, please, let's take one more question before you give response, even if you're not going to take more than two at least.
Assalamu alaikum. Are you hearing me?
Please go ahead.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, my question is basically on the ways in which interested investors can actually come into this kind of opportunities, because I believe quite a number of people have interest in having investment in this sector. So how can we actually come in, especially in this sector?
Okay, thank you. Now let's, Sam, we can respond while we'll take the next batch if time permits, please. Thank you.
All right,
Sam?
so there is an entirely, I don't want to call it different, but there's a whole market, right, for organic farming and organic products, right? And that is something that you can explore. A lot of people do explore that market. What you find is that a number of countries, a number of users of commodities do pay a premium for organic, products that come out of, Africa or Nigeria, specifically, right? So it's a market to explore to the extent that, you are able to control that chain. They will typically require you to get some level of certification for that, right? My personal opinion around that is when you look at that continuous gap in the production and consumption patterns that we have, and the fact that, again, permit me to say that Nigeria is not yet food secure, right? That it then becomes tricky to begin pushing everybody towards organic farming, right? Considering the cost, the time it takes, the sort of yields that you get out. I think it's, first of all, let's get to food security, and then with sustainability, and then we can begin, going that. But it doesn't stop investors from going ahead, if you have a commercial farm, to then go ahead and do some level of organic farming. I can guarantee you that you would definitely get a premium for doing that, right? So that's one way to go. Most of the smallholder farmers that we deal with, they use inorganic fertilizers, your typical NPK, urea, to do their farming, right? For most of the farmers that we deal with. But then you would find a number of them that indicate interest in doing something organic, and then what you do is you also have a market that you can find for those sort of farmers, right? So that's how we play around that space. But mostly, the farmers do inorganic farming. And then, sorry, I missed the second question.
I think it was basically asking how individual investors can come and bring, financial investor and come and bring money to take advantage of opportunities in the entire value chain.
Okay, so the exchange exists, is licensed by the Securities and Exchange Commission, right? So today you can interact with the exchange as a financial market investor. Typically, you would be required to do so through a broker. So your regular stockbroker that has been onboarded on the exchange is able to then, guide you or direct you through to investing on the exchange.
Thank you. Do we still have more accommodation to take one or two questions? Sam?
Yes, please. I can take, I think, two more.
Okay. Kafaya Fakoya, please.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for that wonderful lecture on agri financing or agri investment. I have one quick question because agri is very tricky for anybody who wants to invest if you do not understand and have the patience to do so. But I know that there are some, let's say, chambers, like we have the Ikeja Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture, which is based in Ikeja. And I'm also a member, as in I invested with them as a passive farmer. And I have so far viewed, this might be my second turn, and I've so far yielded, the investment yields like 50% of the original, or what you put in. That is after 6 months, you get 50% as a return on investment. So I think that is an encouraging way to actually invest in the sector. And of course, we are just going into food security, which is essential before we can start talking about export. But then I think if we have more of such bodies or cooperatives that can come in, like take up the mantle of agriculture and other allied areas, and then invite people to become passive farmers by investing their money, I think that will go a long way in creating the, and in actually driving the economic recovery that we think agriculture can provide. I think that is one of the ways we can actually do that.
Okay, thank you. Rahman Delegun, please. Your question, we need to hurry up because
sorry, I think my question has been spoken to, so.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
Okay, Mirabel, please. Mirabel's iPhone.
Hi, everyone.
Mirabel's
Sorry,
iPhone.
I joined very late.
Okay, just your question. Do you have questions?
Sorry, I joined very. Yes, I do.
Please go
it's just a simple question because you're using terminologies that I don't understand. So please, can you explain the term food security? What do you mean by it?
Okay, thank you. Sam, I think you can go. Take the questions now. The first and the second one. Sam?
Okay, so for the first one, I think maybe I'll come back to you, Mr. Bashir. You can advise on, share your thoughts around investments that, tend to promise, returns that are in excess of what, at least from a financial standpoint, permit me to say, is reasonable, right?
Okay, I will take it. You can take the next one, please.
Okay, so with food security, a number of things we'll be looking at would be, one, the availability of the food, the availability of the food, accessibility of the food, and then you'll be talking of how nutritious the food is, right? So I would say again that for a country to have food security, that food must be available, it must be accessible, and the food must be nutritious.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to check the chat box for other questions. I'm not sure I can read any other ones. If any other person can help me out on questions that have not been taken up.
There are no questions on the platform, on the chat box.
There's a question.
There is a question. Who are the brokers working with AFEX?
Okay, Sam. Brokers with AFEX.
Please take that again.
Brokers with AFEX. Who are the brokers with AFEX?
Yeah, so a lot of the typical stockbrokers, right, have onboarded on AFEX. So what we've done over the past 2 years, particularly, is that we've tried to get them on board. So you'll be talking the likes of Meristem, FBN, Quest, Apel Securities, Ava Capital, Marble Capital, Cardinal Stone. I mean, your typical DSU brokerage. So your typical stockbrokers, right? Today we have about 50 of them that have onboarded, and then there's engagements going on with the rest to then get them to that point. I understand that a lot of the pushback, and I think this came in one of the questions, was how do you then invest in something that you do not understand, right? So a lot of people struggle with understanding the dynamics of commodities. How do they work? When do I buy maize? When do I sell maize? Right? But I then say that the fundamentals apply. They might be slightly different from equities when you're carrying out analysis, but then the fundamentals remain. Demand supply dynamics. If you don't understand our immediate environment and the fact that, like I said, we're monoseasonal, right? So there is a period where we would all go to farm. There's a period where all the farmers would harvest. You would find that the typical period for most of the commodities, or the most certain period for you to make good returns by entering into the market, is to come into the market sometime in November. So October, November. That's when the harmattans just begin, and grains are dry enough just right after the harvest. So prices are typically at floor levels at that point in time, and they tend to only go up, right? But you also need to be careful to be able to watch the market, and this is what the exchange provides you with: information. So on a daily basis, there are daily closing prices for all of the commodities that are listed on the exchange. On a weekly basis, there are weekly reports, that you could access it on the exchange's website. We also find that a number of the stockbrokers, add these commodities reports, based off of the numbers that, on the transactions that take place on the exchange. They have these reports incorporated into the weekly blasts that they send to their clients, right? And then on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, there are the quarterly reports and also special reports that tell you, example, at the beginning of every season, we do a commodities outlook whereby, we take a survey from the previous year. We're able to tell you what happened the previous year, and then based on everything that is happening, we're able to then say, look, this is what we think would happen in the commodities ecosystem or the environment in the year coming, right? If fertilizer prices have increased for whatever reason, the expectation is that prices of the commodities, which are the output from the farming activity, would go up also, right? So we're able to then tell you all of this, or give you all of this information, and then it guides you, right? Other than that, we interact with the brokers on a daily basis, make sure that we arm them with information around the commodities ecosystem, and then they apply their financial expertise, in terms of analysis from a technical standpoint, looking at the numbers, understanding what they mean, and then they're able to apply this, in giving you advisory, right? But overall, that's how we operate, and at any point in time.
Yeah, thank you, guys, and thank you, Sam.
The brokers are hit.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. It's been a pleasure having you around, despite no notice. I hope Mr. Balogun is also fine. It's quite surprising that we couldn't have him on board. But of course, you've done a fantastic job, despite the short notice and the few period you have been able to engage with us. We would like to release you so that you can catch your flight. You're already in the flight, so I think we have distracted you enough today. We wish you a very safe flight to your destination. I will catch up with you after the conversation, by God's grace. Please, I would also would expect you to share the slide with us so that we can share with our audience for their consumption. Once again, we are most grateful for your time and the sacrifice to filling the gap for Mr. Balogun. Thank you. Wish you safe flights.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks everyone for the opportunity, and apologies once again on behalf of Ayodeji. I'll come back to you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Let me take the other question that was not taken yet. That is with respect to the sister that spoke about investment through the chambers of commerce and giving a very good return, northward of 50% return. What I would say is that maybe you share more information about that, but as a practitioner in the investment space, I would add more so that such investment is promising a guaranteed return. The rule of thumb when we have such investment option is that we should be very careful. When you have an investment that promises a guaranteed return, and not only a guaranteed return, a guaranteed return at that level of 50% of your investment, that is quite huge. And if you look at it, very few investment options today promises that. What can go wrong? Most of the time, they do go wrong. So my advice is that we tread carefully, we understand what they invest in, we understand the underlying and the rest, and also as Muslims, we also need to ask questions of how compliant with Sharia is such investment option. And if we do not know, if they give us information that is not clear to us, we can speak to our financial advisor, an accountant or investment practitioner that can shed more light on such investment option. And that is my presentation. That is my advice, or my comment on that investment option. Which other questions are yet to be answered? I'm not sure we have another one.
There's another one. In your
could you please read it out?
And from experience, which is the best commodity or crop to invest in?
Unfortunately, our ad hoc lecturer has left, and I'm not sure, it's not my forte. What we would do is that we appreciate the audience for standing by, and it's been over an hour, about 1.5 hours precisely. We are going to have a repeat of this session, inshallah, possibly post Ramadan. We can have much more elaborate session that would still speak to commodities. I would say this is phase one. We would have a continuation of this conversation, inshallah, and a lot more questions will be answered. We'll bring more resourceful persons as well that would address this question and several other ones that are surrounding commodity and the investment around commodities, inshallah.
Let me say one or two things on that. Like he said, we are not fully professionals in that area yet, but as H&H, the investment club that invited you for this program, we have a couple that we invest in. We started with sesame seed about 4 years ago. We are still learning the ropes, but it's not bad. This year we went into 2-3 others, hibiscus, Cassiatora. I think those are the 2 we added. There is cashew, there are a lot of things in the space, but the most important is that you've got to know how to do quality assurance for those products, because one can burn one's fingers if you just go into commodities, go into the bush, buy those items, and your Indian or Chinese merchants are saying this is not the kind of quality that we are expecting. So, but virtually all the commodity products for exports are pretty profitable, and the most important thing is that you get your foreign exchange from that, which does not fluctuate like Naira, but you need to do a due diligence and as well as be well hands-on on it, rather than just hear that something is profitable and jump into it. But I've mentioned a couple that we try to do business in, and as well as the ones that are very lucrative. So like he said earlier, we are still coming back on this. We'll bring a very practical hands-on exporter himself, not the regulatory or industry people. So for the second leg, you very rudimentary discussions, and they will go deep into what you can do, how you can do them step by step, that you can take into commodities business. So I think I've scratched it on the head for you. Thank you.
Hello, sir. If I may quickly, ask. So you said you have invested in some of their products. So, and when you are mentioning it now, you were talking about the quality of the product. So I want to ask, are you going to the markets yourself to buy those things and giving to AFEX to export or sell for you, or you're buying through them? Thank you.
We go into the bush. We have staff when the season comes that go into where we can find those commodities raw. We clean them to the quality that is expected in the international market, and then we either sell here or export. So whichever is, seems to be easier and profitable at that point in time. So, but we go into the place where you find those things. We don't just stand and trade imaginary products. We go hands-on to it.
All right. So you don't have any relationship with AFEX?
Not yet.
That's what we are trying to. That's what we are trying to build. That we have invited them and then invited you to also hear about how they do it. So next level will be doing it through them.
Right. Thank you very much. It's clear now.
You're welcome. Any other questions or clarifications, even though we don't have our lecturers here? I think it's been quite interesting despite the initial issues that we have had. So as I said earlier on, we promise that we would, inshallah, would bring back the second leg of this conversation post Ramadan. May Allah spare our life till then and beyond. On behalf of, okay, hands up. Okay, Damilola, Karim, and Unifade, can we take it one by one? Questions?
Yeah, sure, please. Thank you very much. My name is Damilola Karim, and thank you very much. I joined late, unfortunately. But the question I have for you is that what platform do you have, or to kind of like continue this conversation? Do you have like probably a website or a platform that one can join, so just kind of like continue this conversation going forward? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, my brother. Unfortunately, we do not have a platform for the conversation. We have our training. What we do as an entity, we're an investment company, more or less a club. Of course, we are registered as a company. And one of those things we do is to educate the entire Muslim Ummah and the public at large. When we have our training, to throw our training open so that they can also benefit beyond us. And that is one of our objectives as a group. And what we do is that apart from this, we share the presentation from our lecturer. But of course, we always also publicize our lectures when we do have them, such that people can benefit. And to also let you know, we alternate between mundane lectures as well as a spiritual lecture. So this is on mundane activities. But of course, we would have the second leg of this, even before we have the next spiritual lecture that would center on topics of the deen and all that. So that is how we do it. Not that we have a platform to engage for further conversations. I hope that is clear enough.
Very clear.
An area that we can engage. Okay, I think that Minola is a lady.
No, I'm a guy, sir.
Sorry, don't mind me.
No problem.
The voice sound effeminate. I'm sorry. So one other thing that we can assist in and take the conversation further is we also help to mentor investment clubs. So if you are interested in gathering people of like minds across disciplines and vocations, you can start your own investment club and begin to do all kinds of halal businesses that will benefit you, your family, as well as the Ummah. Just like the way we started small through some group called TIDCL in 2008. And then we have come to this, we have a couple of clubs we have mentored, and we are ready to do more. So you have our, one or two contacts of the people that invited you. So if you're interested, we can take that further and then assist in mentoring people that are interested in forming investment clubs. It's never too late. Money. So in 5-6 years, it will add up to millions. So that's an area we can take the discussions further, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you very much.
So Onifade,
you're welcome. Okay, Onifade, please.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you for the beautiful presentations. Unfortunately, the early part of that presentation was not audible at my end. I could barely hear anything. So I want to seek indulgence if I could have a recorded version of this presentation today. I would really appreciate that, just to ensure that I have a complete picture of what is being discussed today. That's my request, please. Thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome, Alaji. I'm not sure you missed though. I think because we started late, because we have delay with our lecturer, we started around some 20 minutes to 6 or so. I'm not sure that you necessarily missed anything, if I'm correct. But if not, I think we have recording, but most important, or more importantly, we'll share the presentation from the lecturer. We'll share, if you share your email address, you would have it, inshallah.
All right, no problem.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi
wabarakatuh. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I think, yes, thank you, my sister. I think we are done. I think it's a convenient place to draw the curtain for the conversation today. We thank everyone who has been part of this conversation since 5 o'clock. I thank you for your time and for your contribution. As we have promised, you will share the presentation slides with us. Once we have your email address, you would have it, inshallah. And we promise to have the second phase of this presentation, of this topic, inshallah, post-Ramadan. We would let you know, we'll share the information at the appropriate time. We ask Allah in His infinite mercy to make us be part of people that will witness Ramadan and benefit with have the blessings of the month of Ramadan with our family, and make us grant our requests and give us the best of this one and the hereafter. May Allah preserve us till the end of Ramadan and beyond. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.